I kept saying later. Later, when things slow down. Later, when life is easier. Later, when I finally have time. And one day, later never came. That's when I realized I wasn't postponing plans. I was postponing my life. If you think this doesn't apply to you, that's exactly what I thought too. For most of my life, nothing felt wrong. That's the part people don't talk about enough. There was no big disaster, no single mistake I could point to. Life just kept moving, quietly. I woke up early, went to work, did what was expected of me. I paid my bills. I answered my emails. I showed up to birthdays and holidays. From the outside, everything looked fine. From the inside, it felt busy. Busy became my proof that I was doing life right. If I was tired, it meant I was productive. If I was stressed, it meant I was responsible. If I didn't have time, it meant I was needed. That's how I justified everything. I told myself I'd rest later. I told myself I'd enjoy life when things calmed down, when work was lighter, when money felt safer, when I had more control. The truth is, life never felt empty enough to scare me. It was always full of small things, deadlines, errands, obligations, little problems that demanded immediate attention. And because there was always something to deal with, I never stopped to ask if this was the life I actually wanted. I didn't feel unhappy. I felt occupied. Days blended into weeks, weeks into years. I stopped noticing how often I said not now, next year, someday. I thought that was maturity. I thought that was being an adult. Looking back, I understand something now that I didn't then. When nothing feels wrong, you rarely feel urgency. And without urgency, you delay the things that matter most. I didn't abandon my dreams. That's important to say. I didn't wake up one morning and decide to give up on the things that once mattered to me. There was no dramatic moment where I said, "This isn't for me anymore." I just kept postponing them. There were places I wanted to see, not the kind you brag about, just ordinary places that felt meaningful to me. Small towns, quiet roads, places where time feels slower when you're actually there. I imagined myself going someday, when things settled down, when work wasn't so demanding, when responsibilities felt lighter, when I could finally enjoy it without stress. There were skills I wanted to learn, things I was curious about but never prioritized. I told myself I was too tired to start, too busy to focus, that it would make more sense later when life was calmer. There were hobbies I kept pushing aside, books I meant to read, ideas I wrote down and never returned to, creative thoughts that slowly faded because I didn't give them space. And there were people. That part is harder to talk about. There were conversations I meant to have, phone calls I planned to make, visits I postponed because they didn't feel urgent. I assumed there would always be another opportunity. I told myself, I'll reach out when things slow down. But things never slowed down. They just changed shape. Every delay felt reasonable. That's what made it invisible. One delay didn't matter. One missed trip didn't matter. One unanswered message didn't matter. But delays don't disappear. They accumulate. They turn into distance. They turn into silence. They turn into a version of your life where the things you once wanted feel unfamiliar. I didn't notice the moment when dreaming quietly turned into remembering, when planning became something I used to do, when curiosity faded into routine. No one warns you that you can lose things without losing them all at once. There's no announcement, no signal, just a slow drift away from the life you imagined. And the most dangerous part is this: everything still looks normal. You're still functioning, still showing up, still handling what needs to be handled. So you assume everything is fine. But inside, something is waiting, something patient, something that keeps saying, maybe next year. And year by year, that voice gets quieter. The realization didn't arrive with drama. It didn't come during a crisis, a breakdown, or a moment where everything fell apart. There was no single day I could point to and say, that's when it happened. It came quietly, so quietly that I almost missed it. One day I became aware of how easily I said no to things I once said yes to, not because I couldn't do them, but because they felt inconvenient, because they disrupted the rhythm I had grown used to. I noticed how comfortable I had become with routine, how repetition felt safer than possibility, how familiarity slowly replaced curiosity. There was a time when new ideas excited me, when change felt like opportunity instead of effort. Somewhere along the way, that shifted. I started choosing comfort without realizing that comfort was slowly shrinking my world. I caught myself dismissing ideas before they had a chance to breathe. Trips felt like trouble. Learning felt unnecessary. Trying something new felt exhausting before it even began. And none of it felt like failure. That's what made it dangerous. I looked at old photos and didn't feel nostalgia. I felt distance. The man in those photos was smiling in a way I no longer recognized. Not because life had been easier back then, but because he still believed there was more ahead. He made plans without calculating risk first. He imagined possibilities instead of managing limitations. I didn't feel anger toward him. I felt understanding. He wasn't lazy. He wasn't careless. He thought he had time. That belief follows most of us through life. It's quiet, reassuring, and deeply convincing. We assume time is patient, that it will wait until we're ready, until things make sense, until we feel secure enough to enjoy life without guilt. We treat time like something we own, when in reality, we're only borrowing it. Time doesn't pause when life gets complicated. It doesn't slow down when responsibilities pile up. It moves forward, evenly and without emotion. The hardest truth wasn't that I had failed. It was that I had delayed myself into this moment, not through one bad decision, not through one dramatic mistake, but through thousands of small choices that felt harmless. Each delay made sense. Each excuse sounded reasonable. Each "not now" felt temporary. Until one day it wasn't. I realized that I hadn't been protecting myself. I had been avoiding discomfort. And avoidance has a cost that doesn't show up immediately. Avoidance doesn't hurt at first. It feels like relief. It feels like choosing peace. But over time, avoidance turns into absence. Absence of growth. Absence of direction. Absence of the person you thought you'd become. The saddest regrets aren't about mistakes. They're about the things we never tried because we kept waiting for the perfect moment. I waited for clarity. I waited for confidence. I waited for life to slow down. It never did. And one day, I noticed something unsettling. The future I kept planning for had quietly turned into the past. I wasn't afraid of dying. I was afraid of realizing how much of my life had already been lived on. Pause. If you're listening to this and thinking, I still have time, I understand that feeling completely. I lived inside it for decades, but here's what I learned too late. Time doesn't disappear all at once. It slips away in ordinary moments, in busy mornings, in postponed conversations, in plans that never quite reach the top of the list. You don't lose your dreams dramatically. You lose them gradually, while everything still looks fine from the outside. You keep functioning. You keep coping. You keep telling yourself nothing is wrong. And that's exactly the problem. Nothing was wrong. And that's why I didn't notice I was slowly losing my life. You don't lose your life all at once. You lose it by waiting for the right time, waiting to feel ready, waiting for life to slow down. It won't. If there's something you keep postponing, that's the thing that matters most, because later doesn't disappear. It turns into never.